Professor Glenn Gebhard is a professor at LMU School of Film and Television and currently serves as chair of film and TV production. Gebhard is an Emmy award-winning film and video producer and director of documentaries and narrative films. He has a BA in European history and Spanish from the University of Dayton and an MFA in film production from the University of Southern California. Gebhard achieved Academy Award consideration for the short documentary film Victims of Another War, The Aftermath of Parental Alienation. Professor Gebhard has also produced and directed 3 feature fiction films, which were distributed worldwide. His recent work includes a series of 4 documentaries called Cuba at the Crossroads. He's also completed Cuba, A Lifetime of Passion with HDNet, Crossing Borders, A Cuban Returns, which aired on PBS, Bayman, which aired on New York's Metro Channel and PBS, Dreaming a New Cuba for New York Times Television, which aired on the Showtime channel, a farm picture co-produced by the Long Island Farm Bureau about suburban sprawl on the farmlands of Long Island, New York, and Greetings from Fire Island, which won Best Documentary Award at the Long Island Film Festival. Professor Gebhard's latest documentaries are Sarah Cecile, a documentary about international child abduction by parents, which was produced for PACT, an NGO based in London. His film, Cuba, The Forgotten Revolution, won an Emmy for Best Documentary and streamed on Netflix, the History Channel, and ZDF Germany. And tonight, Professor Gebhard and his colleagues will discuss the recent film, Red Storm Rising, The Struggle for the American Communist Party. Can you please help me welcome Professor Gebhard?
Hello, everybody. I will use this many times in the future. I guarantee you. Where should I start? I'm going to show you a trailer for the film. Then I'd like to just talk a little bit about the project, where it began and how it ended. And a little bit of the film of a couple of different elements. One is kind of what I call the narrative thread, the red thread of the film, and the metaphor of the film. And then I'm going to have some of my comrades here do that. I want to say this is not an advocacy film. I'm very, very much in the middle of the road politically, but I look at this as a historical fact, and we as Americans should know our history, and we should know that there are a lot of different elements to politics and where we came from and where we are now, and things kind of work, hopefully everything comes back to the middle. Okay, so it's just a 2-minute trailer. It is being distributed by American Public Television, and they're releasing it nationwide on May Day, which is appropriate. So I put their little logo in front. Here we go.
The Communist Party in the United States was at its strongest for the 15 crucial years between 1930 and 1945.
William Z. Foster was an important figure in the emergence of the American Communist Party.
Earl Browder became the head of the American Party in 1932, and under Browder's leadership, the party really achieved its greatest influence in American life.
Foster thought of Browder as someone who was going to play a subsidiary role.
The Great Depression began in the fall of 1929.
From 1928 to 1935, there's enormous growth in the party, kind of momentum of this discontent with the way that many working people felt was characterizing this system. The communists provided a viable option for direct action and militancy. By 1938, the party has representation in 48 states.
People are going to march forward. With the people will belong the victory.
Earl Browder's great slogan was, "Communism is 20th century Americanism."
It got him on the front page of most of the major newspapers in the country.
Foster's sense that Browder was lording it over him and deliberately humiliated him, and maybe Browder's fear that Foster was perpetually plotting against him, had turned those political differences into a deep kind of personal animus.
these are people who are working together in the same organization, and both are seen as essential to the organization, but they didn't like each other.
These kinds of movements and politics are part of our American tradition.
You know, this film started 25 years ago. I had an idea. You know, I grew up in the Cold War. When I was a kid, being a communist was a really, really bad thing. And, you know, you didn't want to be a communist. So I figured American communism, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? And so I wanted to see all about the communists. So I went to the party and I said, you know, I want to kind of film. And they said, okay, you can do interviews and stuff. So the one story I have is I went with my mom once, who passed away about 10 years ago, and went to New York, and I said, you wait in this coffee shop, because I've got to go over and talk to the communists. And so I went across the street, and they started calling me comrade, by the way. So I said, holy shit, comrade. But I went up, and they had a holiday party. They didn't call it a Christmas party, it was a holiday party. So they're putting up stuff, my mother's there, they come over, we start joking, we're all laughing, and I said, what are you trying to do, turn my mother into a communist? So after that, I went a number of times, and you'll see some of this stuff in this video. And I went to Washington, D.C. with them for a demonstration. I interviewed Gus Hall, who was a kind of long-time Stalinist leader of the party. And then they kind of cut me off. So I really couldn't continue, which frustrated the hell out of me. But this is the stuff that I shot. It's just a couple of shots I put in here. It's raw, it's not edited.
Is that your mother?
No.
Why do you suppose that's the bestseller?
Because it's the truth.
This is
Gus
Gus
Hall.
Yeah.
And I'm the national chairman of the Communist Party.
When was this shot?
2000, something like that. He died in 2000.
Okay.
When I was elected the national chair, it wasn't simply me replacing Gus Hall. That was an element of it, but there was a larger element to it, was a change in the generation that was leading the party.
So I couldn't finish that film, and it frustrated me. And then I thought, and I started reading and reading, and normally I make films in a weird way. I don't do all the research and then make the film. I start shooting and learn things along the way. So the film inevitably changes enormously. So I got interested in the history of the Communist Party. And I read a book about Earl Browder, then I made sure to get a hold of the writer who came to the screening. It was Jim Ryan, if you remember. And then started, learning a lot, and I read, and then started shooting this film with a $5,000 LMU grant. I took that $5,000 and I drove around the East Coast and I did interviews, right? Just interviewed people, and I didn't know what the hell to do with it. I had 5 or 6 long interviews, and I just could not fathom what to do with this. Put it on the shelf, and I was saved by COVID, because I had nothing to do. And I went back to that footage, and I cut what is called a radio edit. The radio edit is, you don't have any shots of anything but the interviews, but you put the interview bits in a certain order to tell a story. And then I started gathering material. And this film, it's a documentary really made of interviews and shot. We call it B-roll, but it's B-roll, photographs, just things that highlight, the thing. But I came up with in a documentary, we always try to get what we call a red thread. It's a narrative, narrative thing that pushes the story together. And I found out about this battle that was going on between two guys that were running the party. One was a real hardcore Stalinist named William Z. Foster, and a guy named Earl Browder who he had an ego involved here, and he wanted to join with other left-wing parties and become a player. And so the first thing I'm going to do is show some little clips from the film, 5 minutes worth, maybe less, of things that went through the whole film that supported this narrative push. So I start with 1957, where Earl Browder is being interviewed by Mike Wallace. 1 minute clip cost me $2,500. I was pissed off about that, but I really wanted this, so here we go.
Let's talk about the Communist Party today in the United States. I understand that only last week you called one of the party's top men, William Foster, an evil man who all his life has been motivated by a mania for personal power.
I've been attempting to tell what I know for the last 10 years and received very little encouragement. I receive a great deal of encouragement to tell what other people think they know. But I am not in the world to tell other people's stories for them.
Browder had invited Foster to attend the Profintern Congress.
Foster was a well-known radical when Earl Browder invited him to go to Moscow.
Foster and Browder returned from Moscow.
Foster joined the Communist Party.
Foster was very interested in helping, but the people who needed Foster got a very bad treatment. Browder worked for Foster, and he worked very hard, but he was not very appreciated. The first moment when Browder showed the resentment that he felt toward Foster occurred in 1924 and 1925 in Moscow. Foster had gone to Moscow to get a judgment on one of the many intra-party disputes, and he sent for Browder to come help him. Browder arrived in time for the very final meeting. At this final meeting, Joseph Stalin showed up. Stalin asked Browder at the end of the meeting to give Browder's opinion on a question that was in dispute at the time. But Browder feared Joseph Stalin, so Browder demurred. And for that, Foster became enraged. Foster expected his assistant to echo his points of view. And as a direct result, Foster left Browder in Moscow.
Browder eliminated Foster.
This is all of our favorite character, right? Sam Darcy. This was probably shot about 1970.
As he could, and he eventually developed a full-scale struggle against Foster and got himself elected as the national secretary of the party.
Basis. Foster believed that the Communist Party should be, in the end, a vehicle for representing a radical revolutionary perspective.
Browder is indicted for passport fraud. He had obtained a passport under another name and traveled on international communist business.
Browder's imprisonment gave Foster the hope that Foster could take over leadership of the party. So Foster had to sit back and silently watch Earl Browder deform the party that Foster loved.
In May of 1945, a French communist magazine published an opinion piece by French communist leader Jacques Duclos, in which Duclos, seemingly speaking as the leader of French communists, said, we've considered Comrade Browder's propositions and we reject them. This came as a tremendous shock to American communist leaders because it was instantly recognized that this was from Moscow. You can almost feel Foster's delight when suddenly, out of nowhere, Browder's power and authority is given a definitive knock.
Until his death in 1973, Earl Browder was one of the loneliest men in America. Browder had become accustomed to addressing sellout crowds in Madison Square Garden. His loneliness and isolation continued at his funeral in 1973. There were fewer than 10 people in attendance.
In March of 1961, he was visited at his hospital bed by Khrushchev and Suslov and others. He died in September at the sanitarium in Moscow, and there was a funeral cortege through Red Square with high-ranking Soviet officials as pallbearers.
So, that's my narrative thread, this battle that was going on. Then, all right, I've got that, but what's the theme of this film? How do you deal with the thematic elements? And I had no clue. And then I realized what the original motivation for all these guys was an event. Now, you may not know this, but the 1st of May is an American holiday. It was born here in Haymarket in 1886 with Haymarket Square riots and bomb being thrown and all this stuff. Only we don't celebrate May, 1st of May, but everybody else does. So here's a couple of, I bring Haymarket back, I introduce it, somebody talks about it, then I keep bringing Haymarket back, and I end the film with Haymarket. So there's a couple of
Haymarket was really the beginnings and an early part of this larger, what we would call the Great Upheaval. Socialists and anarchists call for a meeting at Haymarket where they want to have a forum to talk about this violence that the state is enacting against working people, about the ability of working people to be able to assemble, to have rights in the workplace. And that's when the Chicago police kind of arrive in military formation to kind of break this event up, because you can visualize, the police kind of marching into Haymarket, and you can really see how it all went down. And someone throws a bomb into the police and into their formation, and the explosion sets off chaos. And the aftermath of this was a heightened frenzy to arrest anybody who had been questioning capitalism. The focus ends up on 8 of these socialists and anarchists, and the ones who were hung are known as the Haymarket Martyrs.
And to many radicals from the 1880s and the 1890s onward, Haymarket represented the most evil features of American industrial capitalism, repressing the workers.
I think Foster would have heard about Haymarket even early in life. Foster talked about it, and I think for him, it symbolized this sort of brutal confrontation between the radical working class elements on the one hand and the employee class on the other.
Browder's entire generation did consider Haymarket one of the inevitable atrocities that capitalism would breed.
And the eventual downfall of American capitalism.
And if somebody like Foster, whatever potential was there, that was lost, and it was lost through the character of this particular political organization. And you could say that both Foster and Browder were failures in terms of their political projects. But I don't think that absolves us of, from facing these kinds of issues that, after all, they were trying to face in their own way.
Americans were participating in politics rooted in their local communities, in their workplaces, in their neighborhoods, connected to international politics and movements and excitement that motivated them to demand a better lives for themselves and for their neighbors. These kinds of movements and politics are part of our American tradition.
So that's basically the end of the film. So in making the film, I didn't have a lot of money to make this film. I think the whole cash budget was less than $50,000. And I relied on my comrades. And they had just as much to do with this as I did. And so that's why I felt it's really important that each of them say what they did, because if you look at a whole film, you don't realize all the little details that go into it. And I've worked in sound, I was an editor, I shoot part of my documentary, so I thought I would bring some of the people who worked on the film up. So I'd like to start with, let's start with Mario. Mario, he's the director of photography of the film.
Okay, so the making of the Red Dawn Rising. There's not much to talk about this film in terms of, the technology of this thing since we started was completely different to how we ended. And we started actually, what is it?
It evolved.
It evolved, yes. So, there. Okay, the documentary film first interview started in a studio in Los Angeles using a green screen. And, I put up, at that time, I put up carpet there because of the resonance of that floor, it would sound like a cave. So we had to work a little bit on the sound. And I have a China lamp there, and I have a camera that is no longer state of the art. It's an HD camera that, for the time was okay. And I lost the white balance on the camera. The white balance is the reference color for the camera. I lost it during the interview, so we end up with a pink face or a pink. We have to really color correct it in the. This is 709 kind of shooting, so small corrections and so on and so forth. The camera had a gamma type modification that you can use, and I did some of that. And the next location was east in the USA. We shot in Connecticut, and we've been using that Reflect Media Chromaflex Chromate collapsible screen kit to be able to unify the stuff that we shot already in the studio back in the location. This stuff is somewhat effective. It was developed in England, and it throws an LED into the background. That's a great thing. It has some beads made out of glass, and it reflects only the green, but the person remains, with the skin color and so on and so forth. And it could be all the way to the back. There's no problem there. But and it's still, they use it obviously for like if you're going to give the weather in a station, you have the background. Some of the stuff is this gray thing rather than green. So you can project here either green or blue in the background and so on and so forth. So that was that.
Mario, for the uninitiated, explain why you would do that. Why would you want a green background?
Okay, it's a color that is not being used.
What are you going to put in it?
Right. The
If it's
sound.
green, you can take the green out and put anything you want. I could have the guy sitting in New York, anything. In this case, we use windows and doors as our theme.
Right. And this was the camera at the time, not something that you will use probably today. And I used some of this lighting from Lowell, the Diva 200s with the fluorescent. And, it was the kind of thing that we were looking at doing at that time. That was kind of the state-of-the-art kind of thing. And then we went over to a hotel conference room to set up an interview in Philadelphia, and that's the conference room. And again, trying the best to use what we have and be able to get some even, background there on the green, and so we can take it out later on. Then, same thing, we use that in some Sennheiser 416 microphone with work with the sound there. That's a conference room again on the left. On the right is the interviewer's house in New Jersey. We did that interview there. I recorded the audio directly into the camera with the Sennheiser 416 microphone. Again, this is a minimal crew, it's 2 people trying to do everything. And, the best white balance was achieved at this location. Also, it was the easiest way to remove the green background at that point. The camera has some issues with that white balance. It kept shifting even in the white balance. There were some issues. I don't know what happened, but that's what happened. All right, there were some windows in the room, but the light was constantly shifting, et cetera, so we move it to the right-hand side to have a little bit more even type lighting. And then towards the end, we did this last interview, but the screen got stored in a place that had exposure to water, so it became moldy. So I opened this thing here at this living room in Champaign-Urbana, and I said, oh my God, what happened here? And I said, hopefully I'm trying to get this mold out of the screen while we're keying this out. And when I came back, I said, let me try it, and it worked, okay? And also I bought myself a couple more backgrounds to replace this thing because I wasn't going to be working with mold anymore. And this was shot with the Lowell Toga LED XL. These are LED lights compared to the fluorescents. And that's, I think, pretty much it. This last interview was done in Champaign-Urbana, and oh, the thing about the glasses, this thing produces a ring of light, so you have to be careful when you're shooting glasses. You're going to reflect the donut of the light into the glasses. So there's a positioning of the face compared to where the camera is to be able to eliminate that. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce the other comrades together as sound people. And Roy Finch is a professor, Eureka, here at LMU. I can't remember who this guy is.
I'm Sonny.
But, they all took mercy on me. Thank you. Caesar, Noel, and why don't you guys just do what you're going to do, Roy?
Give me a second just to get this set up because I'm going to actually open up a music session here. Caesar mixed it, both of them in his studio.
Tim was a composer.
Tim was the composer.
And Roy was sound.
Yeah, so I'll just very, very briefly, being a sound professor, I can't help but but teach it 1 second of sound, which is this. There are sort of 5, we think of 5 food groups in terms of audio for documentaries and film. Can you guys hear me in the, yeah?
The recording.
The recording.
Yeah. All right. I think of 5, here, I'm gonna do this. I think there are 5 food groups, even though most people think of the dialogue and the music, and then there's some other stuff. So dialogue being the main food group, you're always trying to get that as clear as possible. And the second food group, music, extremely important emotionally. But there's 3 others, and they're actually done by different people, and they're sort of divided up differently and approached differently. And one of them is Foley, which is basically every sound that a character is making. So that'd be like footsteps, clothing movement, props, like me touching that mic just now. And the 4th one is going to be backgrounds. So all of the winds, anything that's going to be like, you know, not specific to what we're seeing, but sort of in the background to create the world. And then there's hard effects, which is what most people think of when they think of sound design. So that would be specifics like those gunshots and things like that. So those are sort of the 5 food groups. But from a sound design standpoint, for documentaries, I like to add Foley in. So we're going to actually listen to a little bit of the Haymarket without that pesky dialogue or that pesky music. So we're going to go into music later. But just so you can sort of see or hear how the different levels are taken into account. But from a standpoint of dialogue, you noticed how all of the different areas where Glenn was doing the interviews had different surfaces, right? So from a sound perspective, I'm seeing carpet on one and wood floor on another. And so part of the job of the dialogue editor and also Caesar and his team is to try to get that so that it sounds all uniform, so that every interview sounds like it was done in the same environment, it's all the same level. So a lot of pain goes into, believe it or not, even down to the syllable. Sometimes a syllable doesn't sound right, and you'll find a syllable from another word and splice it in to kind of Frankenstein words or phrases together. So there's a lot of detail that just goes into that dialogue, and you're looking at it, and the idea is it's supposed to be as invisible as possible, so you'd never know. But with regard to the Haymarket scene, which is what we have up, I'm gonna play you just the actual sound design. So we had a Foley artist come in and do a lot of the like footsteps when Stalin's walking. You can actually hear that, and it's sort of, most people probably didn't even notice it. You're just paying attention to the information, and then that music is giving you kind of an emotional cue. But there's this little teeny, it's almost like, I think of it like a 3rd dimension, right? It just makes the thing kind of come out off the screen just a little bit for a documentary. Obviously for narrative, you can get much more in detail. Yeah, that's a bad thing, by the way. That's not a happy. Which I may have to restart, which would be just a farce play. Please. Still going. So, Caesar, how many tracks, how many audio tracks did you mix together, just roughly?
The song? Yeah. From the actual.
Yeah, the actual master, the full, not the stems, but.
Hundreds, I don't know. Hundreds. And that's that we didn't have like a full music stem. So we had like a pre-mix that came from Tim, but I don't know, there were hundreds of them. And we have to organize them. I mean, one thing that me and Noel did is that it took us probably about a week of organizing everything so we could route it so it could work for our workflow at our studio. So we had, that took about a week, you know, working on it, you know, I don't know, 6-8 hours a day. And so that's something that nobody ever sees. I mean, like Glenn and Roy never saw that. When they come in, it's like, oh, hit play, okay, let's go. And it's like, you know, it took us like, where's everything at? And we're like, okay. So you have to kind of like take a step back and look at everything and go, okay, these are sound effects, but these are different types of sound effects. These are Foley. You know, this is, you know, all these like background noises, and here's the dialogue, and we have our workflow that works for us, and And it's maybe similar to what Roy does, but it's different. So we have to go in there and rearrange the way we want to hear it, and certain things, so that at the very end we could deliver back, individual, what we call stereo stems of like just the dialogue, just the music, just the sound effects, just all the ambient things, so that they can turn it on and off however they need to, if they want to do a remix or whatever may happen, So, or he wants to do an edit of a promo and he needs to turn off the music at, 15 seconds because it's getting in the way, and he can re-edit it however he needs to,
And it still gets granular. I mean, even though you've done a lot of this work ahead of time, when we're together in the studio looking at the sort of final mix, is that gunshot too loud?
Yeah.
Can you hear that word? So it really gets very granular. It's word by word.
Word by word, musical phase.
Music cue by music cue.
Does it need more reverb right at the end of those tails? And we gotta, we gotta automate or make those moves on the console to make it work.
So here's a little bit of Haymarket with only the background. So that would be the Foley, the background audio, and the hard effects. So none of this had sound, obviously. It's all just built. To give a sense that it's alive, right? So there's a fade there. Right? So it just sort of sets the place immediately without you having to even think about it. Right? This is a slightly thinner sound because we're in a different shot, really. Just some crowds, voices, nothing too specific. What's that pesky interview again? No, I'm just kidding. But we're kind of building up as they're talking about this event that's about to happen, which, as Glenn said, is one of the most important moments in the film. You can hear the sort of restlessness of different crowd.
Can I ask how many times did you record the footsteps to get that label?
We'll talk about the cocktail party effect in a second. So again, specifics now. Right, we're sort of a little bit intimate.
Are you creating most of these sounds or working from a sound library?
It's a blend.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a blend.
We had 5 Foley artists.
Yeah.
So we had a Foley artist, I have a sound library, and also recording new things and putting them in. And then this is actually a music cue, so which we're going to go into in a second. But that kind of gives you a sense of, like, I think of it almost like it's an invisible layer, but it's still communicating information and hopefully making the world come alive just a little bit. And yeah, the simple documentary where it's mostly about the voice and the music. Tim can talk about how many tracks of instruments there are, but we might get up to 150 tracks, including all of the different sound and the backgrounds. And of course, each of the people interviewed is a separate track. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a look into the sound design of the film. And we have what we have here is actually called DM&E, which stands for Dialogue, Music, and Effects. And it's a common deliverable that you give when you are usually, for making a film, if you're going to give it put it in other languages, you could mute the dialogue and record it into a different language, and you still have all the music and all of the backgrounds and all of the Foley. So that's usually how films are delivered. So you can see we have the DX, FX, and MX right there. And so you can also make small adjustments, or if you're gonna, like if you're making a feature film and you're playing it on a plane and you want to pull out words that might be offensive. So it's a standard deliverable. And then you can always make changes. But with regard to, so this is a standard Pro Tools session with the stems. Now we can move on to music.
Sure. I'll stand.
Please.
Nice to your mic. So I'm Tim Snyder. I did the soundtrack, the composer for the film. And I was so honored when Glenn asked me to do this, because Glenn has a legendary history. I'd seen one of his
You were a highly paid guy.
Yeah, I was a highly paid in the rear. But Glenn, I'd seen one of his Cuba films where my friend had done the soundtracks, so I was so honored. But of course, the way these things work, it's a fishing expedition. So he drops the lure into the water, I bite, and then I sent him a couple demo tracks after a conversation or two via Zoom, and then he was pleased with the music. So I was very honored to be selected to do this. And then also because I'd never done a feature project of this length, pretty nervous, and I had to learn a lot from Glenn and from Roy. I'll give you a motif or two about that along the way, but I really thank them for their faith and their trust. Anytime you're composing for something like this, you have to think about the function of the music. And the music has traditional functions. It can assist with the narrative. It can give you a sense of the vibe of the scene or the coming scene. In this film, because as Glenn outlined, the two antithetic characters and their ways of working were so destructive. It was absolute power, corrupting absolutely, not in the sense that they became corrupt, but they corrupted the power itself. When you're done watching this film, you feel almost as if the movement died because of these guys who were so trying to lead it that they killed the very thing about which they were so passionate. So I wanted to illuminate the characters as clearly as possible. And we use what we call a light motif. And the idea there, Peter and the Wolf had this, where each character had not only a theme musically, but even an instrument that represented them. And they appear in different ways. The themes get twisted as they go. And that concept has been in film forever. You see it in Star Wars. There's a leitmotif for Darth Vader anytime he comes on the screen. The shark. Every time you hear it. You can even hear it before the shark appears. And that raises the suspense. So I wanted to use that leitmotif piece, and I wanted to write them in ways where they could interact when the characters had conflicts, and we'll show a piece of that eventually. But let me walk you through first the Foster theme. And I thought about Foster, and he was really calculating. He had a great passion for workers and great passion for workers' movements and suppressing capitalism's evils and evil outcomes, and worked quite hard at it. And I think he was so rhythmic in his forms of protest and his ways of interacting. It kind of reminded me almost of Time Clock and the rhythm of factories in which I've worked. If you're in a factory, it's a very musical being. You're hearing percussion basically all day long, and even some musical tones. So for Foster, I decided on a sort of rhythmic motif and used a lot of marimbas and bell-like tones to represent him. So I'm going to give you 6 versions of Foster's theme because, again, as the emotions and the context change, and as the characters develop, even in this case, begin to evidence flaws, you want the music to be hinting at that. And I think, as Roy just mentioned, so much of this is subliminal. You're watching the film, you might not notice it, but this will give you a sense of how things are in the background. So Here's the sort of Foster theme in the main, if you will. He was a very quiet guy.
It's so subliminal that I'm getting this little happy ball.
Oh, you're getting the rotating, the beach balls, we call it.
Let's see if I can. You know what?
Why don't you do a,
We don't. I
I'll force
restarted.
quit. Why don't you force
quit.
There we are. So that's Foster in the full. When we first introduced Foster, he gets a scaled down version of this. So that'd be the number. I'm gonna label 2. Nope. There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, here he is. So here's when he's showing up.
I think it's because we had power running at the same time as Pro Tools.
I can speak a little bit to the camaraderie of this film. So every time we concluded a session at Caesar's Palace, as I like to call it, which is a highly nondescript place. You walk in and you just kind of think, okay, that orange tree is nice, and there's a couple nice restaurants around there, but then you walk into this fab studio in what looks like a garage. It's very well hidden. The thieves are gonna walk right by it. And there's hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff in there.
And I must say, I'd said this before, the first time Tim walked in as East LA, and we're walking down this driveway, this an old garage, and I could see his face. What the hell am I doing?
Is Hollywood?
Yeah. And then we walked in, and these guys are just like kings of mixing. I mean, they knew what they were doing. But we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. And then at the end, Glenn pulls out these cigars, and then he pulls out the rum. You say, well, I'll just have one, and you know how those, you end up in that vortex. So we were vortical for a while.
Restart, so
You
it's
okay?
good. Keep jamming.
Are you restarting the whole machine?
No, I'm restarting Pro Tools.
Okay, and Pro Tools is a very efficient piece of software. It takes about 20 minutes to boot itself up, and that's providing you have the dongle.
Was Glenn offering you Cuban cigars?
Yes, he was.
How did you know?
And Cuban rum, no less. Yeah, it was great, and never was one enough. The generosity.
You gotta keep the boys oiled up.
Yeah, right. I can just give you a prelude of some of the other things. So when we get to the Browder theme, I'll just give you while we're waiting for things.
Yeah.
And we'll get there after another few Foster clips. We good?
Yeah. Let me just, I'm gonna close out of that nasty video.
So in the next Foster clip, another thing you have to do with music, in addition to what I spoke about before, is provide transitions. So as you're moving from a scene in which Foster is not appearing to one in which he is appearing, you don't want suddenly the Foster theme to bang with all that clangorous stuff going on into the user's experience. So I thought maybe a little piano line leading into it would be good. And then I realized that piano line could be used to divulge things that go on with Foster later on. So this would be clip labeled 3. You want the track that says 3? It starts with 3. So the piano is the transition. And you'll hear a little something wrong with Foster in here. And we tried to time it where anytime something was wrong, that sort of cacophonous note would show up. And we can go to the next one. So this would be 4. This is where there's some rising action. So this is a busier Foster, and there's some there's some conflicts going on. And as time goes on, things begin to unravel. So this will be the next clip. A little shakier. And now the piano is taking over from those more clangorous sounds. These guys have heard this about 1,000 times. Now, by
Luckily, it's good music, so it's okay.
Yeah, you're a good man. By the end, of course, Foster, there's a point where he's beginning to run for president and he gets sick during it. But by the end, when he dies, we have this sort of Foster falling apart theme. So in this next one, you hear the pitch modulated in ways to represent that. Should make you a bit queasy, right? Kind of like I had too much of that Cuban rum. That's what's going on there. So the Browder theme, and this was a really hard one because, as Glenn mentioned, Browder was the more emotional of the two. So he's not in the land of calculation and determining how things might best work out. He's more, how can I rise the fastest? How can I maneuver the populace? Very much ahead of his time. Speaking in Madison Square Garden, using all of the orational tricks that are available to one, even some great vibrato in his voice when you listen to it. It's quite interesting to watch this guy. And of course, oddly, we all notice as time goes on, he starts to wear a sort of Hitlerian mustache. But what ends up being his downfall is when he falls in love with himself, when he sees himself on the cover of Time and such. So we wanted to have I wrote the most beautiful, emotional theme for him. And then I played it for the gentleman on the Zoom, and neither of them liked it. So this is Glenn and Roy. And they were so sweet in rejecting it. Roy saying, that's so beautiful. If you don't mind, I'd like to use it in one of my other projects. So Glenn suggested, and the director's always in charge, Glenn said, we need something a little more rootsy because Browder was from Kansas. So I suggested that even though the blues were in their earliest days, we have something more folky and guitar-based. And I literally recorded this piece in the living room, so you can hear shuffling noises, you can hear headphones moving around. The rhythms aren't quite right, but I kept it raw because I wanted it to feel Kansasian, if you will. And when it first comes out, I put an AM radio-like mix on it so that it was consistent with the moment, the time. If you listen carefully, that's not the one, but you can hear in one of them, you can hear the click track going off into the background.
I gotta say, Tim, that was my favorite of all of them.
Really?
Yeah, I love that one. Every time it would come out, I was like, oh, cool, this is like, you know.
So as the film goes on, I changed that equalization, for those who know what EQ is, so that eventually the guitar became modern, even though really we didn't have modern recording techniques pre-World War II, but I just wanted it to sound like even the technology around these guys is moving on. So we get to the second Browder clip. I'll give you two more. As these characters evolve, you also develop alternate themes for them. And Browder, when he begins to become popular, there's this sort of, you want to cry for the guy because he's so beginning to be lost in himself. So this is alternate theme one. I'll give you two of them. This is the one where you can hear the chirping headphone. I thought you could. So for the last one, this is sort of the parallel to Foster's being sick. So this is what we use when Browder is at the most highly emotive stage. And when he dies, and you'll hear it has that same first note, but it develops differently. This is the sort of tragic figure of Browder. So he's on the cover of Time, he's filling Madison Square Garden, he dies, 10 people come to his funeral. Yeah, it all kind of collapsed. The last thing we'll show is a clip where the two are in at the same time, and you'll hear there's a sort of submix that we gave to Caesar, who helped things along significantly. But here's where the two are interacting, and when they're speaking more to Foster, you'll hear more of the Foster theme.
Which
And
one is that?
That's the one at the 3930 or wherever. You might have put a marker in it. If not, we can let people see it.
I was thinking maybe do the Haymarket part
Okay.
and just the music.
Whatever you want to do.
That could be kind of,
Okay.
because they've been through it. So remember all the factory stuff, right?
We've seen this so many times, we know exactly what she's saying.
Let's see, maybe I'll move up a little bit, right? Because I don't think you're starting here.
And the music rises and falls in volume because it's relative to the voices. That's the kind of thing that Caesar would do to it. Ducking, we call it.
Is this old art, Glenn? The artwork.
So you heard a little bit of the backgrounds I just brought in there.
And Roy made that subway train sound, that L.
Yeah, totally different. Like, so there's no, anything you're seeing, there's no sound. Anyway, so that's sort of a little mix on, sorry man, I didn't mean to do your job. But,
No, hey, well, you know.
But that's the kind of thing he's doing in real time and getting everything exactly perfect.
Yeah, there was stuff for the music that, I mean, because the mix came out, what he gave us was really, really good. But sometimes we need to add like, you know, for lack of a better term, it's like, you know, a little bit of echo at the ends of where the music either stops, just to make it, that echo carry on to the next scene, like sonically. Because if not, it just sounds so like hard cut. So we're adding all these little things that they're not, I don't think most people can hear. We hear them. Yeah. But I think it's more like a subconscious and a feeling about how you make the audio work with all that. And we're, you know, and I mean, it takes two people to run the system, you know, that's why Noel's like he's on a Pro Tools screen and he's looking at everything, and I have the movie in front of me with a mixing desk, you know, so I'm not seeing all the Pro Tools screen. It's just, hey, rewind it back to this point, and he's pretty much driving, and I'm just like finessing, you know. The mixer's my instrument, you know, so it takes two people to run it. I mean, one person can do it, but it's just the workflow's so much like smoother and intuitive when, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you don't see a pilot by himself on the plane. It's 2 or 3 people running it, you know. It's kind of the same feel that we have. And all the stuff that they gave us, the sound effects, all the dialogue. The dialogue, I think, at one point, there's always issues because it's just the name of the game. They're recording, I don't know, during COVID, and they're giving someone a mic that doesn't know how to use a mic, and we have to, you know, you treat it a lot. I think we had to treat it some more just to smooth it out, you know. So those are all, it's all a game. It's all hey, we're all playing.
It's a collaborative
thing, and we're all making it work. And at the end of the day, you know, like the way I mix films, it's like a music kind of thing where like the dialogue is king. So just like in music, the vocal always has to be heard. Like that's the storyteller of the song. In the same way with dialogue, it's like we make sure that that's the main thing, and everything has to like go in and out of, not get in its way. But it's all, you know, they're there when we're mixing it, or when we get, what do we call that? When we're all together and we're all giving, you know, notes of the thing. It's, you know.
We're all together drinking rum.
Yeah, drinking rum, smoking cigars. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not like that. That's afterwards, but I mean, we're all there, and it's not like I dictate the mix. It's like Glenn and them are telling us, hey, we want more of this, we want more of that. It doesn't. It sounds really thin there. Can you do something? Yeah, we go and we do it, and we bring it up, and a lot of it's just fader moves or EQ something, but a lot of it's a big collab thing. That's always what it is, and you know, we don't.
Jim is saying, can you bring the music up? And Roy's saying, can you bring the backgrounds up? Ben's saying, I can't hear the dialogue.
Yeah. So we have to make it work. We don't have to make it work, and we're taking notes. Our assistant's taking notes, just like, you know, he's listening to what they're saying, and you know, when they leave, they're like, okay, just you know, just fix it. And we're like, we spent another few weeks fixing it. I was like, okay, let's meet again, and that's kind of how it goes.
Well, the one thing, and I'm going to give you all I'll give you a link to the film, but the final credits are over the Haymarket monument. All the credits come, but Tim had come up with this, like, it was almost metaphorical, this bell, you know, that was in the film. And so we put a couple of bells, and then we stopped the bells, and then we had background birds. And I specifically used the background from the cemetery. And then we slowly bring in the sound of the riot at Haymarket. You can hardly hear it. It's almost like it wasn't there, but it was kind of an echo to the past, which was the whole idea. So you'll see that at the very end of the film.
Oh,
This program is sponsored in part by Loyola Marymount University, a Jesuit Marymount University in the heart of Los Angeles.
So glad you dragged Darby in there too, huh?
The what?
Sorry, you dragged Kirk in too. Kirk Dart has something.
Oh, I get everything.
So now, folks, we do have a few minutes for Q&A. Does anybody want to start us off with any questions? And just a reminder, we are video recording the event and live streaming it, so we do encourage you to use this microphone. I'll be happy to pass it around to anybody who has a question. Does anybody want to start off?
Yeah. So I have a quick question. Who's the good guy and who's the bad guy between the two? Who should we be rooting for?
That's a really good question. They both have their assets and their faults.
Hold on, the microphone's coming.
So I wouldn't say there's a good guy and a bad guy. It was just a study of two different characters and how they clashed. And one became an egomaniac. The other guy was so into this whole movement, but at the same time going against some of his original what he believed in, which was syndicalism. I won't explain all that, but you'll see it in the film. That you wonder why he was doing this. So you decide. I don't know. Anybody have a?
I was just going to say, I find it so interesting how they end. That one ends with a state, he's in Red Square and everybody's there, and the other one is sort of, how many people went to
He got kicked out of the party, and
sort of dies alone and very bitter, as you can see from that interview clip with Mike Wallace.
Oh, and I have to say I really appreciate Carol, who told me, why don't you put that at the end, at the beginning? And I said, yeah, that's a great idea. And so we put it at the beginning and the end. Thank you, Carol. But sometimes you don't think of stuff.
And that created an additional 30 hours of work
Yeah.
for everybody. Everything had to get shifted
Well,
around.
We showed the film at LMU, then we realized it's not right. And so we re-edited it again. And we had to do everything. Remember we set up in your office with the sound, the music and everything. It was a lot of work. Yeah.
Hi, I'm an art historian here at LMU, and I teach Paris Commune to the present, and so much of this material is very familiar to me. So I'm curious about how much the focus on these two characters is so fascinating as the through line, as you describe it, the narrative through line. And I'm curious about how much of the context of the Bolshevik Revolution or any of that materiality came into the story, because you have to sort of tell that story first before it has an emergence in American politics. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, we definitely talk about the Bolshevik Revolution in October 1917. Of course, Russia had a revolution at the beginning of 1917. It was a democratic revolution under Kerensky. And then in October, Lenin, who was running a minority party, has a revolt and takes over. So yes, that spurned the whole thing for American communists. Many of the people were socialists, they were syndicalists, they weren't communists. They certainly weren't Leninists. Lenin came later and said, well, we'll take Marxism, but we have to have a vanguard party. It goes against syndicalism. Well, I don't want to get into explaining all this, but it's in the film, and it was the thing that spurned them on.
All right, we've got a question from Ada from Whittier.
we'd like to know. You mentioned that most people probably wouldn't notice some of the smaller adjustments you made in the music, like the echo. Are there any other small things that you added that you think elevated the music or film, even though most people wouldn't notice it?
Oh, okay. I don't know, tons of them. I don't know if I can even think of like
The old timey stuff we would do.
Oh yeah, I think a lot of it was, you know, like we would see parts of the film that looked old, even though I think a lot of it came already pre-treated from Roy. We kind of took the liberty to kind of make it more crunchy, you know, like just make it sound really like when you look at old films, you think of old sound that sounds, you know, the frequency response is really limited. It's all
stress.
Yeah, it's all. So we kind of made it sound like that to make it, you know, look. And there's a bunch of little things like one that I think we remember a lot. There's a guy. If you look at the film, they're shooting, and some guy there's a shotgun. Like guy goes like that, and it goes down. So it's like all those little things. We try to emphasize little things that we see from an outside perspective. Oh wow, look at that, and we push them up. And I don't think. I mean, people, you'll know, you know, if it's not there, you'll notice it. But as soon as we put it in, you're like, oh, it's just normal. Like, because when we hear sound, natural sound, we're not like going, we hear birds and we're gonna go, oh, wow, birds, you know, we just know they're there because our brain is just, you know, collecting that data and just, it's normal. So all those little things we try to push in and out, even though we don't know. And obviously if it doesn't work, they're gonna say, yeah, that doesn't work, and you know, okay, we move it out, you know. So we don't get married to it.
I have an addition I can share also. I spoke to that little piano thing that was a transitional element in getting to Foster, and also something that helped develop his character. That same set of notes shows up at the end when there's this sort of triumphant scene. You always want to leave, unless you're, you know, Von Trier or somebody who wants to leave people empty and melting. Glenn wanted at the end a sort of, and Rachel Storch, one of the narrators, gives us this, speaks to how important these movements were and how essentially American these protests were and their value, that this is the essence of the nation. So Glenn wanted it to end a little happier. So I had to write a happy semi-Americana theme, and there's a little cornet that goes, well, that's the same notes from the Foster theme. So that's just an insider.
And I was going to say, Caesar mentioned this before, but transitions for any young filmmakers out there. Walter Murch talks about that transitions are the things that sort of separate amateurs from people who are growing and becoming young professionals. So a lot of the transitions are sound, and it's just carrying, you know, a post-lap, carrying a little music over, or carrying some sound over, or a pre-lap, starting it before you see the image. So those sorts of transitions, and obviously with reverberation and echoes and things like that, really make a difference when you're putting your films together, whether it's documentary or narrative.
Yeah, and the theme is king. When you look at a film, it's not, the most important thing is not the film, but what the film means, what the bigger picture is. And I think that's always something when you're making a film, you say, what the hell am I doing here? What is this all about? And it comes to you, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time.
A friend of mine once said that theme is your due north.
Yeah.
Right? So whenever you're lost, which happens in narrative or documentary, and you need that compass, it's like, where's my due north? And so you always come back to that theme. And in narrative, certainly, themes and documentary, themes can change. They can shift, they can morph, or you can even discover the theme during the process, as Glenn mentioned. You may start off with one theme and halfway through go, oh my gosh, I'm not making that at all. I'm actually making a different film.
And that's what I say to students. I always say theme is important, but you may find it when you're editing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't.
Flexible.
You know, but it's something you need to be looking for, you know, and come up with. And it's there. I believe in the subconscious. This is going to all sound strange to you, but sometimes when you edit a film, you step back and say, I don't remember doing any of that. And I believe that you could call it a spiritual element, or some people could call it, you know, something in the back of your brain, but something else is controlling you, you know, when you make a film. And sometimes the film works, sometimes it doesn't. We fail. Hopefully we succeeded with this, but it is all of us who succeeded. They came up with ideas that I had no idea about, but it helped the film. And I said, oh, wow, Carol came up with a great idea for the beginning of the film. I said, you know, that's really a good idea. So, you know, it's not just all the guy who's up there as a director at any means. Other filmmakers here can tell you how important everyone working on the film is and what they bring, and the themes and the ideas that they bring to the film are essential. Otherwise, you're not going to have much. I do not believe anybody can make a film on their own. It's impossible because so many different elements to it. And there's expertise that I don't have. The expertise here made the film.
Right, folks, we're at time, but I will take one more question from, I believe, a student. I can't leave students. I want students to be heard.
I'm a former student at Glenn's, but my question is for all of you. You know, in times kind of as scary as these, you always look to history to sort of make sense of things. And I was just curious in kind of the investigation of this film, are there any insights or things, you know, that you pulled that, I don't know, give you insight to what's going on in America today, whether with these two men or just kind of the greater party?
When we were all mixing the film, we all said multiple times, holy shit, that's exactly what's going on today. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot in this film that I recognize what's going on today. As far as distribution of the film, I didn't think anybody would touch this. You know, it's about communists, my God, you know. But it's not, you know, it's about part of our history. That's the way I looked at it. American public television had no problem, so God bless them. So it's going to be at a local PBS station near you next year.
Yeah, they lost their money.
All right, folks. And with that, can you please help me thank all of our panelists today.